Okay, imagine this scenario playing out. A prominent public figure finds themselves facing some pretty serious accusations.
Uh-huh.
They hire a lawyer, and that lawyer does something, well, kind of unusual, sends a detailed letter straight to the U.S. Attorney General.
Wow. Okay. Straight to the top.
Exactly. And according to the source material we're diving into today, things are, quote, getting wild and, well, from this source's perspective anyway, not looking good.
And sending it directly to Pam Bondi, the AG.
Yeah,
Yeah, that definitely signals the stakes are incredibly high here. When a defense goes public or semi-public like this, you know it's a big moment.
absolutely. So, welcome everyone to this deep dive. Today, we're really digging into the details around these mortgage fraud allegations involving Letitia James.
Yeah, and our source material for this deep dive, it draws really heavily from one specific analysis of the whole situation. And this analysis focuses right in on that letter sent by James's attorney, Abby David Lowell, to AG Pam Bondi. It also brings in commentary from a forensic accountant, Sam Antar.
Got it. So, our mission today is to unpack this letter, but specifically from the perspective of our source analysis. We want to look at the lawyer's arguments, the evidence or maybe lack of evidence that the source sees, and what this analysis suggests are the real implications of it all. We're aiming to help you understand the points being made and hopefully cut through some of the noise.
And we're going to approach this with a lot of curiosity, definitely ready to break down what seem like some pretty complex details into parts you can really grasp.
Okay, let's jump right in then. Our source analysis immediately characterizes this 5-page letter to Pam Bondi in, well, pretty strong terms.
Oh, no.
They suggest it reads less like a solid legal defense hitting specific points and more like their words were a political pity party or even woe is me.
That's quite a take from the source right off the bat.
Yeah.
It suggests, at least in their analysis, the main goal of the letter might be seen as maybe influencing perception, public or official, rather than just dismantling the legal arguments point by point.
Right, exactly. The analysis frames it pretty bluntly as a desperate PR stunt. They're suggesting it doesn't actually disprove the allegations, but maybe tries to control the story around them.
Okay, so what is the core argument in the letter itself, according to this source's interpretation?
Well, the main thrust seems to be that this whole investigation is just political retribution, specifically orchestrated, they claim, by Donald Trump.
Okay, the political angle.
Yeah.
Does the source say how the letter tries to back that up?
Yeah, it does. The source points out the letter actually quotes Trump's own words, things like, I am your warrior, I am your justice, I am your retribution.
Right.
The lawyer apparently uses those quotes to argue Trump is basically weaponizing the Department of Justice against James.
Interesting. And how does the source analysis critique that approach?
Well, the source analysis views it as kind of cherry-picking quotes. Their perspective is that this tactic focuses really heavily on the politics of it all, instead of actually getting down to the nitty-gritty legal evidence about the alleged fraud itself.
So, diverting attention, maybe.
That seems to be the source's read. They feel this framing is really an attempt to position Leticia James as a victim. The analysis even mentions the source describing a sentiment it perceives in the letter, invoking identity politics, using the specific phrase, woe is me, I'm a black woman. The analysis suggests this framing is strategic, trying to deflect from the actual substance of the accusations.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit. Let's unpack the specific issues that seem to be at the heart of this, the ones likely reported before this letter, and how the letter tries to counter them, according to the source analysis. Director Pai's letter, as our source quotes it, apparently tackles 3 main things.
Right. First up, an allegation about some documentation where a property in Virginia was listed as Miss James's principal residence.
Okay, the Virginia property. What's the defense there, per the source?
So the lawyer's explanation, according to the source analysis, blames an error on a power of attorney document. It mistakenly said it was her principal residence.
An error.
But, the lawyer argues, 2 weeks before that document, James had apparently emailed the loan broker, in all caps no less, stating clearly it would not be her primary residence.
An email beforehand.
Yes, saying it would be for her niece, Shamise Thompson Harrison. The lawyer claims the broker got it, understood, and marked James down as a non-occupying co-borrower, meaning, she's backing the loan financially but not living there.
And the source analysis mentions the context the defense provides.
Yeah, that James was basically helping her niece financially with a down payment, and the loan only needed one person living there to qualify.
Okay, so that's the defense explanation. But what does the source analysis make of that point? Do they buy it?
They find it weak, actually. The source argues that the crucial document isn't the email, it's the loan application itself where the residency statement was supposedly made.
Right, the formal application.
Exactly. The source sees claiming a later email somehow fixes a statement on a signed formal application as problematic. Because, the lender relies legally on that application.
Okay, that makes sense from a documentation standpoint. What's allegation number 2?
This one involves a Brooklyn property. Specifically, a document from 24 years ago that apparently defined it as having 5 dwelling units.
5 units. And the issue.
The loan she got for it required it to be only a 4-unit property to qualify.
The classification matters for the loan type. Okay, so what's the defense on the Brooklyn property?
James's lawyer, according to the source, argues that, okay, yeah, maybe that old document said 5, but the property was bought in 2001 and has always functioned as a 4-unit place for her and her family.
How it was used, not how it was classified.
That's the argument. They say her mother, a friend, her brother lived on separate floors, no basement units. Even after her mother passed, she took 2 floors, the friend and brother the other 2. So 4 units in practice.
Does the defense offer any documents?
The source says the lawyer points to a 2011 document confirming it as 4-unit, plus current NYC records listing it as 4 units today, specifically building Class C3, which fits that kind of multifamily setup.
All right, so current records show 4 units. How does the source analysis respond to that defense?
Well, they counter pretty strongly. They argue how the family personally used the space isn't the key legal point. What matters, the analysis contends, is the official classification of the building structure at the time of the loan. If it was legally classified as 5 units back then, that's a big deal.
Why is that?
Because it impacts lending. It could push it into a different category, maybe residential versus commercial, affecting loan types, rates, everything. The source analysis specifically asks, okay, if the classification changed legally from 5 to 4, when did that happen? They imply the defense doesn't clearly show that transition.
Gotcha. So the historical legal status is what the source focuses on.
Okay.
What's the third point?
Point 3 involves 2 really old references. One goes back 42 years, the other 24 years.
Wow, really digging back.
Yeah, documents apparently filled out by Mrs. James's deceased father. The allegation is that he might have checked a wrong box or, get this, misstated his relationship with Miss James as spousal instead of parental.
Spousal instead of daughter. Okay, that's specific. What's the explanation offered?
The defense says, look, back in 1983, her father, Robert James, was adding her name to a mortgage application for a Queens house, probably to help him qualify or something.
Okay.
The defense states the father filled out the form and he mistakenly described the relationship as spouses.
I made the mistake?
That's the claim. And according to the source, the lawyer backs this up by citing another document from the exact same date that correctly identifies her as his daughter. Plus, the actual property deed apparently lists her correctly as his daughter.
So, contemporaneous documents showing the correct relationship. How does the source analysis react to that one? Still skeptical.
Oh, yeah, quite skeptical. First, they find the mistake claim just hard to swallow. They express it pretty bluntly, saying something like, ain't never mistakenly called my dad my husband.
Huh. Okay. Fair point on the surface.
But beyond just whether it was an intentional error or a slip-up, the source analysis points to what they see as the crucial legal principle here.
Which is?
Leticia James signed the document with that incorrect spousal information on it.
The signature again.
Right. The source analysis argues that signing a document containing a material misrepresentation, which a false relationship on a loan app definitely is, well, that constitutes fraud in their view. It doesn't matter who made the initial mistake or if it was on purpose. Signing means you attest it's accurate.
So the act of signing is seen as the key element of potential misrepresentation, regardless of intent or origin of the error.
That's the source's legal interpretation, yes. So that covers the specific defenses and the source's counter-arguments. But here's where the source analysis finds things get really interesting.
Okay.
The actual evidence attached to this letter, sent to Pam Bondi, the exhibits.
The exhibits. What did they include, according to the source?
Okay, so according to the source, there was Exhibit A, those emails about the Virginia property where she stated it wasn't going to be her primary residence.
Right, the email defense.
Yeah.
What else?
Exhibit B, recent documents, specifically tax documents from 2024 and 2025. These show the Brooklyn property currently classified as a 4-unit residence.
Current tax docs.
Exhibit C, other recent NYC records, again showing the Brooklyn property listed as 4 families today.
Okay. All fairly recent documentation then.
Exactly. And notably, according to the source analysis, these exhibits did not include any historical documents explaining how or when that Brooklyn property's classification might have legally changed from that alleged earlier 5-unit status.
Ah, so they show the current status, but not the historical clarification needed for the time of the loan.
That's precisely the source's point. And their conclusion about these exhibits, it's pretty blunt.
Let me guess, they weren't impressed.
Not at all. The source argues these documents don't actually disprove the original fraud allegations. Instead, the analysis believes they mostly just confirm that at best she scrambled afterwards to cover her tracks.
Oof, cover her tracks.
Yeah. The source's take is these exhibits offer no explanations for the original false filings. They're described basically as a cleanup job, not a real defense based on evidence from the relevant time period.
Wow, okay. So the source sees the exhibits as potentially confirming rather than refuting the underlying issues.
That seems to be their interpretation. Now, adding another layer here, the source analysis brings in another perspective from forensic accountant Sam Antar.
Sam Antar, okay. What's his background, according to the source?
He's described as a Democrat and also significantly a convicted felon himself. He apparently says he learned both sides of the law through his own experiences.
Interesting perspective. And what's his view on the James situation, as reported by the source?
It's quite strong. He's apparently been independently pulling records related to her, and he states, quote, he found her filings riddled with inconsistencies going back decades.
Riddled with inconsistencies. That sounds serious coming from a forensic accountant.
Very. And from his professional viewpoint, he apparently calls it a slam dunk case.
A slam dunk.
Wow.
Yeah.
And he even makes a pretty sharp joke about the defense lawyer, Abby Lowell, saying something like, if Lowell had defended him back in the day, he'd still be sitting in jail today.
Ouch. That's a stinging critique of the defense strategy from someone with, let's say, unique firsthand experience with financial legal trouble.
Definitely pointed. The source analysis also touches on Antar's motivation. It says he wasn't specifically targeting James initially.
Oh. How did he get involved then?
Apparently, he stumbled upon what he calls magnifying red flags while he was doing broader research and writing about New York City finances and politicians generally. Her situation just popped up in his review of public records.
So it wasn't a political hunt, but something he found through his accounting work.
That's how the source presents his involvement. And according to the source, Antar noted other red flags in his review besides these mortgage issues.
Like what?
Things like apparently exorbitant campaign spending, allegations about using private jets paid for by the government that overlapped with campaigning activities, and other issues he identified with her financial disclosures.
Okay, so a broader pattern of potential issues, according to Antar's findings, as reported by the source.
Right. And the source analysis kind of ties all this back to a core principle they keep emphasizing.
Which is?
That regardless of politics, Democrat, Republican, whatever the truth should matter, and ultimately, everyone should be held accountable under the law. No exceptions.
The equal justice under law principle.
Exactly. They even quote Leticia James's own words, cited in the source material. No one is above the law, no matter how rich, powerful, or politically connected you are. Everyone must play by the same rules.
Wow.
And another quote, I will not hesitate to uphold the rule of law and protect New Yorkers. The source analysis explicitly contrasts these statements with the current allegations and the type of defense being presented in that letter.
Highlighting what they see as
significant hypocrisy, yeah.
So what's the current status, according to the source analysis? Where do things stand?
Well, they describe a situation where there's pressure mounting to get an indictment soon. It sounds like everyone involved is basically waiting to see what Pam Bondi and the DOJ will do now.
Holding their breath, essentially.
Pretty much. And the source analysis wraps up its view with a very strong, very stark phrase. Leticia James is cooked.
Cooked. That's final sounding.
Extremely. So just to reiterate the source's overall view of this defense letter, the analysis concludes it proves nothing except how desperate her team is.
Desperation.
And they explicitly circle back to that perceived hypocrisy, stating basically, if you made it your mission to go after someone for the same fraud allegations that you're now facing, will you reap what you sow?
Sort of what goes around comes around. Argument from the source.
That's definitely the sentiment conveyed in their analysis.
Okay, so to sum up this deep dive, based entirely on our source's analysis, we've walked through the specific allegations they focused on, the Virginia property residency, the Brooklyn property unit count, those old documents involving her father. We looked at how the source portrays the lawyer's defense letter. seeing it as very politically focused, almost like PR. We examine the specific responses offered for each allegation, and crucially, the source's pointed critiques, finding those responses weak or insufficient.
And we covered the exhibits, those emails and recent documents, and why the source views them not as proof of innocence, but more like a cleanup job.
Exactly. And finally, we folded in that strong assessment from the forensic accountant, Sam Antar, whose findings, as presented by the source, seem to bolster their critical perspective on the whole situation.
You know, digging into the specifics of a legal defense letter like this, especially through the lens of this particular analysis, it really highlights a couple of key dynamics, doesn't it?
Yeah. What stands out to you?
Well, it really shows how these high-stakes legal battles, particularly involving public figures, they often become this mix of addressing the actual evidence and, well, managing public perception. It's like fighting on two fronts.
That's true. The PR aspect can seem almost as important as the legal filings themselves sometimes.
And it also just underscores the incredible weight and importance of financial and property documents. How seemingly old details or technical classifications of a property can suddenly become central to really serious legal trouble.
Absolutely, the fine print matters, potentially decades later. So all of this really leaves us and you with a significant question to chew on.
Hmm.
In these really complex legal and political storms, how do you, as an observer, figure out where genuine legal defense stops and maybe strategic public relations takes over? It's not always a clear line.
That's a tough one.
And maybe even more fundamentally, what does it mean for the whole idea of accountability when the very people responsible for enforcing the law find themselves facing serious accusations that sound, well, kind of similar to the cases they prosecute?